Hi everybody, this is Miss Caitlin and today we are doing a project and learning about cave art. This one is a little bit different. This project is going to be for our art history B that we're going to hold. So there's going to be a little bit of an art history lesson and then we're going to do the project together. So cave art is the first example we see really of art made by people. It's where we kind of start our art history timeline. Now it's really cool. We kind of divide cave art into two groups. First, Paleolithic and Neolithic. Now, these are two very probably new words for you, so I'm going to go ahead and show you just a little something that's going to help us remember them. So, Paleolithic cave art is usually talking and showing animals. So when we look at Paleolithic cave art, you're going to see lots of pictures of animals, sometimes ox, bull, deer, because they're trying to show, or at least we think they were trying to show, the animals that they see every day, as well as the animals maybe that they would have to hunt or they are trying to keep track of them. The second kind that we categorize them is Neolithic. Neolithic cave art is focusing on landscapes, farming, and people. So that's how you can tell the two apart. Now I know those are very tricky words to sort of like get bombarded with, but Paleolithic is this one, remember, paleo in animals, Neolithic is people and landscapes. Now, cave art can actually be found all over the world, Paleolithic or Neolithic. So if you can imagine the entire globe in your head right now, are you imagining it? Okay, so everywhere on land is where you can find different kinds of cave art. This can span, we think cave art, it spans from about 30,000 BC to about 1 BC. So that was a very, 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 very long time ago. I'm going to show you guys a couple examples of very famous cave art that we see today. So I'm going to go ahead and show you this first image here. Check it out. So this image that we see is found in the Lascaux caves in France. France actually has some of the best examples and probably the most famous examples of cave art that you probably see the most often. So this is one example. This is actually going to be the piece we're inspired by today. You can see it's these hands from all these different people. Maybe it's the same tribe, maybe it's like a family, or maybe it's just a collection of people passing through onto this wall. Now what they would do is that they would take pigment in their hands. Usually this was dirt, charcoal, it could be plants that are ground up, or even just, dust from rocks that they grind, and they blow it onto their hand, onto the wall. So that way when they remove their hand, it leaves this kind of imprint or this haloed effect. So there's another example that I want to show you guys as well of different cave arts. I'm going to show you over here. There we go. So this is an example of Paleolithic cave art where we see it's of an animal. Now this is one of the bulls from the Lascaux caves. It's actually 17 feet long. So that's probably taller than both of your parents standing on top of each other, or even bigger than your house, or maybe it is as big as your house. This is a huge, huge painting of a bull. Now you can see it's pretty simple, but it actually is very realistic. If we kind of look at the lines and the way that the people kind of observed, you can also see there are other animals in the background here or behind it. Maybe these were different animals that the same, nomadic tribes saw, or maybe these are just a collection of the different animals. So again, these are examples from the Lascaux cave in France. So I'm going to switch back to my desk now. And what we're going to do is we're going to gather our materials that we need. So the first thing that we need is a piece of colored paper. Now I'm using like this orangey brown color, but you guys can use a brown paper if you have it. You could even use like, a paper bag and cut that out into a shape. You're also going to need a big piece of paper. I have white today, but if you have a black piece of paper that's bigger, I love that for this project. It would look just as cool. But you do want your colored piece of paper to be smaller than the large one. This is because we're going to kind of frame it and do some symbols around the edges later. And then you need one more piece of paper. Again, this one, it doesn't matter the color, it just needs to be thick. This is going to be for a stencil that we're going to be making. So just have this one off to the side. It's okay if it's, it doesn't matter the size, but you just want this one on hand. So I'm gonna go ahead and set that piece of paper off to the side. And we are gonna go ahead and begin on our picture. So the first thing we wanna do, we're not gonna glue or draw anything just yet. There's no practice drawing for this project today. You'll kind of understand why in just a second. So what we're gonna do, I actually wanna make sure that I have the frame here just right. So when I come back to it, I don't have to try and figure out, okay, where did I want this paper to be? So grab a pencil or a marker. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna line up your colored piece of paper so that it's pretty even with the edges here. And you are just gonna outline around it. Now, it doesn't have to be in marker. I'm using a Sharpie just so that you can see. You can use a pencil if you want. And the idea is that you're trying to leave a mark so that you can see where you want to put the picture when we're done here, when we actually make it. So this is all kind of like prep work for ourselves. So that way, we don't have to do as much work when we come back to it later. Now you can see I'm being very careful with trying to keep this paper close to where I first put it down because I don't want it to move. I'm doing this part actually kind of fast, so if you need to take a moment to actually spend time making sure you can keep this accurate, you can pause the video and then replay it or recontinue when you're ready. All right, so when you're done outlining that, you can go ahead and set that pencil or marker aside, and you should have this sort of frame, this like picture frame look. Now we're actually gonna take these papers that we just prepped, and we're gonna set them aside for now. So go ahead and just set them somewhere else, right next to you, and then take out that extra piece of paper, that thick one I asked you guys to keep close as well. So this is a brand new piece of paper. What I want you to do is grab either a pencil or a marker, it doesn't matter which one, and I want you to go ahead and have that in your drawing hand. Now I'm left-handed, so I'm gonna be using my left hand. Next, I want you to take your other hand, that's gonna be my right hand, and I want you to find a spot on your paper and place it down. Now, I think I like my hand right there. You can also adjust it. Maybe you want your hand like closed with your fingers closed, or maybe you want your fingers open. Decide what you like. Okay, once you are happy with how it looks, you are gonna trace the outline of your hand. Now, it's okay if like you have some of your arm in there too. That'll actually be just fine. As well, the outline for your hand does not need to be perfect by any means. What we're really focused on is trying to get the shape. I'm thinking I might need to like spread out my hand just a little bit more. There we go. All right, and so I'm outlining, I'm tracing. I should also mention my hand, I'm an adult, so my hand is much bigger than maybe your hand if you're a kid. So my stencil, the hand shape that I make, you can see it's gonna be way, way big, and it's gonna take up a lot of paper space. That is totally fine if your hand, your stencil is much smaller, because there are a lot of ways to do this project. So it's okay if if my hand size is different than yours. Now, once we get that stencil drawn out, you're gonna take a pair of scissors and you're gonna cut out your hand shape, and that's gonna be the stencil. Now you can see my hand shape, I kind of wiggled here because I tried to get around my ring, and that's okay too. It doesn't have to be super duper accurate. We're not looking for the most perfect cutout hand. We just need something that's hand shaped that we can use. So I'm gonna go ahead and take some time and I'm gonna cut out my hand. Now I'm not worried about trying to follow those Sharpie lines that I made exactly. I'm more so concerned with just trying to get the outline of the hand. Now I should say it doesn't matter if this is gonna be your right or your left hand, because we can always turn the stencil upside down or right side up to change the hand that it's gonna be. Now again, this part might take you longer depending on, the shape you decided to go for, whether it be a closed hand or an open hand. If you need to pause the video at any point, you can. You do not have to finish and do things at the same time as I do. I want you to take your time and feel comfortable with the work that you're doing. Now, I should also say, if you are cutting and you feel like, hey, this is actually getting really difficult for me to try and like cut all the way around my hand, you can instead, you know, once I got all the way to here, I'm actually going to cut this way and sort of cut out the remainder that I have left. So that way I'm not trying to mess with this paper as I'm cutting, or the extra stuff. See, that'll make it a little bit easier. If you accidentally cut off one of the fingers from the hand stencil, that's okay, it happens, you know? You can either tape it back on or tape it back together, or you can quickly whip up another stencil for your hand. These are pretty fast and easy to make. So you can do that if you need to. Make another one, or just tape it back. All right. So this is my hand stencil. Again, you can see I didn't completely, totally follow my Sharpie lines because I didn't need to. What's most important is that it just looks like a hand. Now we have some scraps here. You can either keep those for other art projects or recycle them. And we can actually go ahead and set these aside because we don't need the scraps anymore. So here's your cutout hand. Now you're going to take your colored paper that we were measuring with before. This is going to be our surface for today. This is going to be kind of like our cave wall. Now, we wanted it to be kind of a natural color because, again, the cave artists, they were using natural material. So again, like charcoals, dust, dirt, even plants. Now, what I want you to do before we do anything with like coloring and drawing, I'm actually going to flip mine over because I had some Sharpie lines on the other side. I want you to take your hand cutout, and I want you to decide, okay, which way do I like it facing? And I want you to kind of think, okay, if I place the hand here, would I like how a hand shape would look? Because remember, we're going to try and do this kind of like that cave painting we saw of the hands. So just take a moment and think where you think you would want to see different hands on your paper. I think I'm going to stick with it being my right hand, so I'm going to keep it this way. And then maybe I'll do a second hand over here. So once you kind of decide how many hands you want, I'm going to do 2 different hand sections today. We can go ahead and place the first one. So I'm going to put my stencil there. I think I might even tilt it just slightly this way. Maybe move it down. There we go. I'm going to be using chalk pastel next. Now you can do this project in either marker or chalk pastel. I find those work the best. I'm going to do the chalk pastel because it's kind of similar for at least the dust that you might see in a cave painting. But marker, again, use marker if that's what you have. Now for the first hand, even if you're using chalk pastel or marker, try and think of a light color to use. So light colors in this case, if we're thinking natural, earthy tones, do like, you know, red, it could be orange depending on the paper that you have, a light brown, really anything that's light. So I'm actually going to do red. And what you're going to do, if you're using a chalk pastel or a marker, you're going to do short strokes. Make sure you hold down your stencil away from the hand. So you can see I'm not pulling this way. I'm actually going this way, away from the finger, away from the stencil. And you're going to do this around the entire thing. Now, this is important. Try and hold down your stencil as best as you can. You don't have to, like, you know, really press down, but just make sure that you have a firm hold on the stencil so that it doesn't move. It's definitely happened to me before when I've been using a stencil and I hold it down really hard, or I'm doing a hard stroke and the stencil like pops up. Doing the strokes outwards will also help with not accidentally getting under the stencil. Now, if you're using a marker, you might do this a little bit differently. You might have to do more of your strokes like outwards. You might have to add more of your material, because for the chalk pastel, we're actually going to blend it, kind of like the way that we see on that cave wall. Now, once you kind of get underneath the stencil here, it's going to be a little bit tricky because you're trying to hold it down. while also using your dominant hand to get those little lines. Now my wrist actually ends here, or my arm ends here, but I'm just gonna do like a little line to help that shape kind of connect. I don't want it to just, end. Okay. Once you're done adding in your chalk pastel for your piece, what you're gonna do, take 1 or 2 fingers and you're gonna blend the chalk pastel. Again, if you're doing this in marker, you can skip this step. There's no blending for you to do. But if you're doing chalk pastel, you wanna sort of do circular motions, but also blend away from the stencil. Again, kind of how like we did those strokes. This is gonna help it kind of, again, have that halo effect. So we're gonna take some time and just blend that in. As you get around the fingers, I find it helps if you hold down the finger part of the stencil and just be really careful. You don't have to press really hard when you blend. Just softly sort of drag your fingers around in those circular motions and away from the stencil, so that way you can get it nice and blended. Now, once you get into these little parts, like between the fingers, maybe you switch to 1 finger to blend. So that way you're not like, really pushing the stencil around. If you accidentally go underneath your stencil, that's okay. It might happen. And you know what? Probably even on these cave drawings and cave paintings, that probably happened to them too. Where, they just moved their hand ever so slightly and the pigment went underneath. The trickiest part, at least for me, because my dominant hand is my left hand, I'm holding down with my right, is doing these parts underneath and blending. Maybe if you did this the opposite way, where you're using your right hand to blend, this might be easier for you. All right. Now, if there's any spot where you're like, hey, I think I want more chalk pastel there, or hey, I think I need a little bit more color, go ahead and add that in. But for me, I think I'm happy with what I've added here. Oh, actually, you know what? Now that I'm looking, I'm gonna add a little bit more of this red down on the palm area. Again, a little tricky because it is underneath my left hand, or underneath my right hand, excuse me, when I was adding it in. All right, there we go, much better. All right, when you are done using the chalk pastel for this part, you're gonna very carefully take your stencil and lift it off. And there it is, the big reveal, right? So there is our first handprint. We're gonna do a second one. I kind of want to make it look like the hands are maybe like they're holding hands, or maybe they're just kind of like, overlapping. I think that would look interesting. So I'm gonna angle it, I think like this. There we go. Now for your second hand, you wanna use a darker color. This can be either a dark brown, a dark red if you have it, or even a black color. If you have charcoal, which is, burnt wood, that would be very much authentic because that's what cave people would have used for their cave art. Charcoal's been around forever, as long as there's been fire. So I'm gonna actually use the black chalk pastel here to kind of give it that look as if we use charcoal. Now, if you're using a marker, you don't have to worry about this. It's just your color might be very intense if you use a black, but if you're doing chalk pastel or charcoal, like me, be careful as you're adding the black. It's a very, very intense color. We're gonna do the same deal. Hold the stencil down firmly and do strokes away from the stencil. So that way we don't accidentally catch it underneath. Now it's also important, don't just try and trace around your hands, because otherwise what'll happen is that you won't get that like very soft looking outline. You'll just get a regular outline. We're trying to make it look like how they did it, where they kind of glue the dust onto their hands, their actual hands, because they didn't really get to have paper and cut out a stencil like we did. Now I'm thinking this hand is going to be a lot easier to blend because I don't have to go underneath my right hand to try and catch the rest of the chalk pastel. Maybe just on this part here. Okay, same deal, you know what to do. If you're using chalk pastel, now we're gonna blend. Again, you kind of want to blend away from the stencil itself. As you get to those fingers, especially for the black, hold them down. Again, you don't have to press super hard, but just be firm. You also may have noticed that I did not wash my hands off before I moved on to the black color, because this color is honestly just going to cover up whatever red was on my finger from before. So I don't really need to clean them yet. Okay. So we're blending. Same deal. Once you're done, carefully lift off that stencil. A little tricky there. Ta-da! Fun! It looks like they're holding hands. How cute. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and set the stencil aside. You don't really need it anymore. And we are gonna clean off our hands for this next part because we don't want our chalk pastel getting on anything else. So I'm gonna go ahead and take a wipe and wipe off my hands. If you wanna pause the video and go and wash your hands in the sink with like soap, go for it. Really depends on how messy you got. For me, I think a wipe is gonna be just fine. Do the job. Right. Also be on the lookout maybe for any sneaky chalk pastel that got in between your fingers. You certainly don't want that accidentally getting on your paper. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and set my wipes aside. And if you have any extra dust, I really don't have terribly much. I'm just gonna tap mine onto the table, but if you're close to a trash can or a bin, you can tap your extra dust into there. So that I don't need my chalk pastels anymore, so I'm gonna go ahead and set them off to the side. And what we're gonna do is we are gonna need that paper from the beginning. Remember the one that we made the outline for the frame for? It's back. So what we're gonna do is we are gonna glue this onto here now. So the reason why we did that outline was to make it easier for us to remember where we wanted to place it. Now I'm gonna go ahead and flip my paper over very carefully, and I'm gonna glue the edges. Now if you don't have glue of some kind, you can use really whatever you have that's adhesive. So like if you have tape, go for it, really whatever you have. And we're gonna glue it down. I know everybody's got their different glue techniques. I'm a fan of the glue the edges and then do the X in the middle. I know some of you maybe do the swirl technique where you swirl the glue. It's like a stick. Or maybe you guys just do the lines. All right, all glued. Let's go ahead and set that over there. Carefully take your image and you're gonna line it up as best you can. I think that looks just about good. Okay, and then go ahead and just gently pat down the corners. Now you might get chalk pastel on your hand for this part, which is okay, it happens. Chalk pastel is very messy. If you did marker, again, you're not really worrying about it, but if you got chalk pastel on your hands again, you can just wipe them off or go clean them off once more. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is that we are gonna add some designs along our border. Now remember, for cave art, usually they're trying to say something about their day, kind of document their lives, or tell a story, usually. At least that's what we think. So for us today, we're gonna be making symbols along our border. I want you to be thinking about maybe a story that you might wanna tell along the border with symbols. Now for this, you can really use whatever you have. I'm actually gonna be using markers for this part. You could also use oil pastels if you have them, or a crayon, or even pencil. If you're doing this on like a black piece of paper, you could definitely use like a white crayon or a white chalk pastel, that would, or a white oil pastel. I think that would look really, really cool. Now let's first tackle the four corners. So I think I'm gonna put a person here, I'll put a hand down here, maybe a leaf, and then maybe like a rainbow line at the top. So when you're coloring, just be careful. For me, again, I'm left-handed, so this part is going to be my problem area. What I mean by that is I have to be very careful not to put my whole arm down on my picture, because if I do that, not only am I going to get chalk pastel all over my arm, I might smudge my work. If you're right-handed, it's probably going to be this corner that's a little tricky for you. So just be careful. And add 4 symbols of your choice to the corners. I'm thinking I want to add a person with one of his arms up, right there. For the hand, again, we're not trying to make anything look like super complicated for these symbols. We want them to be pretty darn simple. So I just did like a really simple hand shape there. Maybe for a leaf, if you do feel like you want to be a little more detailed, you can add in like the lines, like the veins of the leaf. For the top here, I might just do a rainbow. Maybe it's like a representation of mountains or a river. Now, once you have those 4 corners, I want you to think about symbols that go in the middle of those sections. So that really can be anything. If you want to do an animal there, you could do the sun, the moon, the stars. Again, think about a story that you're trying to tell. I'm actually going to start down here and do like a little bird. Again, it doesn't have to be super complicated. I'll do a sun over here. There we go. And then maybe at the top here, I do an ox. Maybe these are the animals that if I was a cave artist that I saw. And so I documented them. And then over here, maybe I can do the moon. Okay, so by doing these different areas, we're kind of balancing our picture with focal points. That just means it gives us something strong to look at as we're going around the border. At this point, you can go ahead and fill in the rest of the space with whatever kind of symbols you want. Maybe for down here, I'm thinking, you know, I want a little bird that's maybe running through the grass. Like maybe if that was me, if I was a part of like the Stone Age, that's something I saw. Maybe if I was a Paleolithic cave painter, I would want to share with other people that, hey, I saw this bird. Maybe it's like a quail or something. That others could know in this area, we're seeing those kinds of birds. Now see, for the grass, it doesn't have to be super complicated. You can do like just straight lines, diagonal lines to kind of show. If you want to do like animals that are next to each other, like maybe you want to do like a smaller ox. I think I'm going to do that to show like maybe there's like a herd that comes by this certain area at some time. For the leaf, I think I'm going to add more leaves over here. We'll do like a little one there. Then maybe like these swirling lines to show like it's a specific time of year. You could also add wavy lines to show like a river or to describe a river. And then maybe some swirls. Sometimes you can also draw symbols just because you like them. I'm sure the ancient people who lived in caves did the same thing, where they just tried to draw stuff because they thought they were interesting. Now what to do at these 2 sides? Let's see here. Maybe I'll do a rabbit over on this side. So I'm actually going to turn my paper. I'm going to do like a little rabbit that's running this way. It's not going to look super realistic because he's a little symbol. And he's kind of like a silhouette. And I can draw lines behind him to show that he's running. You could also draw trees if you wanted. They can be really simple. Again, it doesn't have to be terribly complicated for this. Let's see what other kinds of symbols we could do. We can do circles. Let's do some more of the leaves, maybe at the sides here. So as we can see here, maybe it's like the person, they're gathering a certain leaves or materials to either craft something. Maybe up here, it's like these are the ox that the person saw. And for the ox, we can put them maybe kind of going through mountains, which are just gonna be like those upside down V shapes, which is also something you can add. And then you could even add like a field to show like, hey, this person might be a farmer of some kind. And there we have it. So that is our completed project. We learned a lot of new things today, a lot of new words, and just a lot about ancient cave art. So let's quickly just do a little review of the things I want you guys to remember. And I'll even try and see if I can make a study guide for you guys. So the two groups of cave art that we learned about today are Paleolithic and Neolithic. So remember, here is how you spell them, and here are the words that you're looking for. Here's Paleolithic and Neolithic. Remember, Paleolithic cave art showed animals. So you can think of our little ox friend when you're thinking of Paleolithic cave art. Neolithic cave artists painted landscapes and people. So you can think of this little landscape here when you're trying to remember Neolithic. And then remember, cave art can be found all over the world. The cave art that we looked at today was from Lascaux Caves in France, which are very famous with the bull that's like 17 feet long. And ancient art, it's the first example of art that we see in human history, where it's like this is where the art kind of begins and where we start documenting it. It's the oldest one. There's not much art before this, so this is the beginning of it all. And remember, the reason why we think that they created cave art in the first place was to communicate with each other, to show their daily lives and to kind of show what kind of animals are passing through or what they did throughout their day, because they didn't have written language and they certainly didn't have a common language that they spoke with each other, at least one that wasn't complicated like ours yet. So that was a lot of fun, you guys. I hope you had fun. If you do create a project inspired by our class today, make sure you share it on our Facebook page. Otherwise, we will see you next time. Bye.